On a quiet September evening in 1982, a shadow fell over Chicago. A shadow invisible, silent, and deadly. Mary Kellerman, a 12-year-old girl, reached for a single Tylenol capsule, unaware that something ordinary had been cursed. Within hours, her life ended, claimed by cyanide hidden in plain sight. What seemed like a harmless pill became a vessel of death, a dark whisper that terror could hide in the most familiar places. At first, her death seemed like a tragic accident. But soon more lives were taken. Adam Janis, 27, died at home in Elk Grove Village. Stanley Janis, 25, succumbed hours after taking the same medication. James Lewis, 35, was found lifeless in his Chicago apartment. By the end, 7 ordinary citizens had fallen in just days, all victims of a malevolent hand that had weaponized trust itself. Panic spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Poison in Tylenol, Chicago in fear." Mothers emptied medicine cabinets, pharmacists pulled bottles from shelves, and ordinary routines became acts of caution. The city's heartbeat seemed to slow with every new revelation. Authorities scrambled. The Chicago Police Department, aided by the FBI, quickly realized this was no accident. The crime scene offered no fingerprints, no witnesses, no suspect. The capsules had been purchased from stores across the city. Whoever did this had carefully, methodically turned an everyday product into an instrument of fear and death. Chicago was paralyzed by an invisible terror. Schools warned parents, businesses posted cautionary signs, and even a glance at a medicine bottle could send a shiver down the spine. These were not random killings in alleys. They were murders committed in plain sight, in the sanctity of homes, under the guise of ordinary medicine. Amid the chaos, Johnson & Johnson, Tylenol's parent company, faced a crisis that could destroy public trust forever. CEO James Burke made a bold, unprecedented decision: a nationwide recall of over 31 million bottles of Tylenol capsules. The move cost millions but sent a clear message: public safety was paramount and transparency could still protect a nation. Investigators combed the city relentlessly. Every store, every pharmacist, every sale of Tylenol was scrutinized. Tips poured in. Letters arrived. Anonymous calls flooded police lines. Yet every lead went cold. The killer had vanished into the shadows, leaving only fear, confusion, and the lingering question: who could summon such darkness from something so ordinary? By mid-October, the story had spread nationwide. Families in New York, Los Angeles, and Miami emptied their medicine cabinets. News broadcasts detailed the horror unfolding in Chicago. The Tylenol murders had become more than a local tragedy. They were a chilling warning that even the most ordinary objects could hide unimaginable danger. And still, the most haunting question remained: who had the audacity, the precision, and the cruelty to commit such calculated acts, and why Tylenol? Chicago, the authorities, and the nation waited, haunted by a killer invisible, unstoppable, and unknown. In that autumn of 1982, Chicago learned a lesson that would never be forgotten. Trust can be shattered in an instant, evil can hide in the most ordinary places, and sometimes the most familiar things carry a darkness you cannot see. The city of Chicago didn't recover from the shock of Mary Kellerman's death. By early October 1982, fear had settled into homes, schools, and businesses like a shadow that refused to lift. The Tylenol murders were no longer a local tragedy, they were a national headline, a chilling reminder that ordinary life could turn deadly in an instant. Authorities intensified the investigation. Detectives from the Chicago Police Department, joined by the FBI, scoured every lead. They examined every Tylenol capsule recovered, traced sales records from grocery stores and pharmacies, and interviewed countless witnesses. Each clue revealed one horrifying fact: the poisonings were deliberate, carefully planned, and executed with terrifying precision. The killer had chosen victims at random, or perhaps based on some sinister logic that remained hidden. Amid the chaos, a name emerged: James William Lewis. In October, Lewis sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson, demanding $1 million to stop the poisonings. Authorities were stunned. The letter confirmed the presence of a human mind behind the terror, someone not only willing to kill but audacious enough to demand a ransom from one of the largest corporations in the world. While law enforcement arrested Lewis for extortion, they could never connect him conclusively to the actual murders. The true killer remained a ghost. Meanwhile, the public panic grew. Families emptied medicine cabinets, neighbors exchanged warnings, and even seasoned pharmacists worked under a cloud of anxiety. Chicago became a city on edge. Every pill bottle was examined, every cough and headache treated with suspicion. The murderer had transformed ordinary life into a constant test of vigilance and fear. Johnson & Johnson, led by CEO James Burke, faced a challenge few corporations could imagine. They made a decisive, bold choice. A nationwide recall of Tylenol capsules, removing over 31 million bottles from shelves. The move cost the company millions but restored some public confidence. The recall became a case study in crisis management, demonstrating that transparency and swift action could save lives, and perhaps even a company's reputation. Forensic teams worked tirelessly. Cyanide traces were analyzed, capsules examined, and distribution chains traced. Investigators discovered that the poison had not originated in the factory. The killer had tampered with the capsules after they left production, a terrifying revelation that confirmed just how calculated the attacks were. Every bottle, every pill was a potential weapon. Across the nation, Americans watched the story unfold. News broadcasts displayed images of concerned families, frantic pharmacists, and empty store shelves. Experts explained cyanide's lethality and urged caution. The Tylenol murders had fundamentally changed public perception. No longer could citizens take over-the-counter medication for granted. Despite exhaustive investigations, every lead ended in frustration. Detectives interviewed hundreds of suspects, retraced purchases, and reanalyzed evidence. The killer remained invisible. There was no apparent motive, no discernible pattern, only the cold, methodical removal of life. Chicago, and soon the country, was forced to accept a terrifying truth. Someone had weaponized trust and the consequences were deadly. By late 1982, the Tylenol murders had left an indelible mark. 7 innocent lives were gone, countless families traumatized, and an entire city transformed by fear. The attacks had reshaped corporate safety standards, public behavior, and law enforcement strategies. But the most haunting fact lingered. The person responsible had vanished without a trace, leaving Chicago and the nation with a chilling, unanswered question. Who had the audacity to commit such crimes, and would they strike again? The story of the Tylenol murders was no longer just about death. It was about fear, trust, and the fragility of everyday life. It was a reminder that terror could arrive disguised as something as ordinary as a headache pill, and that evil sometimes hides in the most familiar places. As autumn deepened, Chicago was gripped by a tension that seemed impossible to shake. Every home, every pharmacy, every store echoed with the memory of lives stolen by something as ordinary as a capsule. Fear had become a citywide epidemic. Investigators refused to relent. Detectives from the Chicago Police Department, aided by the FBI, pursued every lead with relentless intensity. They re-examined the capsules, analyzed fingerprints, retraced purchases, and interviewed hundreds of potential witnesses. Every step revealed a killer who was methodical, calculating, and chillingly precise. The poisonings were not random. They were carefully orchestrated acts of terror, designed to strike fear into the heart of an unsuspecting city. Amid the investigation, James William Lewis became a focal point. Lewis had sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson, demanding $1 million to stop the poisonings. The letter suggested he had orchestrated the attacks, or at least was trying to take credit for them. Authorities caught him attempting to collect the ransom and arrested him. He was later convicted of extortion and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But frustratingly, no evidence ever linked him to the actual murders. The person, or people, who had poisoned the Tylenol capsules remained at large, a ghost in the city's shadow. Public panic intensified. Families emptied their medicine cabinets, neighbors warned each other, and even pharmacists operated under constant fear. Ordinary life had been transformed into a landscape of suspicion. Chicagoans went about their daily routines, but the memory of the murders lingered in every glance at a pill bottle, every headache, every minor illness. Johnson & Johnson, meanwhile, continued to act decisively. CEO James Burke oversaw the implementation of tamper-proof packaging, foil seals, plastic wraps, and eventually blister packs that could not be easily tampered with. These innovations, born out of tragedy, became a permanent safeguard for the nation. Burke's actions set a precedent for corporate responsibility, showing that transparency and swift action could both protect the public and restore trust. The media's role amplified the fear. Television broadcasts showed empty store shelves, concerned parents, and interviews with experts explaining cyanide's lethality. Newspapers printed the victims' faces and their final moments, creating a narrative that was both informative and horrifying. The Tylenol murders were no longer just a Chicago story, they had become a national obsession, a chilling reminder that everyday life could harbor unseen dangers. Despite the efforts, leads dried up. Detectives interviewed hundreds, followed dozens of tips, and retraced sales records again and again. Every potential suspect led to a dead end. No fingerprints, no witness accounts, no pattern, just the haunting realization that a killer had exploited trust in the most ordinary places. By the end of 1982, the city had learned a harsh lesson. Safety could be weaponized and ordinary trust was fragile. 7 lives had been stolen. Families mourned. The public remained on edge. Chicago, and the nation, would never look at over-the-counter medication the same way again. The Tylenol murders became more than a case, they became a symbol. A symbol of fear, of vigilance, and of the power of one person to change the course of a city through carefully orchestrated terror. Even as law enforcement continued their investigation, the killer remained unseen, untouchable, and the question of why remained unanswered. This case was a mirror to society. Ordinary objects, trusted daily, could be transformed into instruments of death. The murders had exposed vulnerabilities, reshaped corporate behavior, and changed the way Americans approached even the smallest decisions about their health. But the killer's identity remained a haunting unknown, a ghost that lurked behind every ordinary act. Winter settled over Chicago in 1982, but the shadow of the Tylenol murders lingered like a chill that refused to fade. Families tried to resume normal routines, but the memory of those lost, Mary Kellerman, Adam Janis, Stanley Janis, and the others, remained vivid. The city had learned that ordinary life could be deadly, that trust could be shattered in an instant. The investigation pressed on. Detectives retraced every purchase, examined every capsule, and re-interviewed hundreds of witnesses. Forensic experts analyzed cyanide traces, criminal psychologists profiled the killer, and the FBI coordinated nationwide alerts. They theorized about motives, madness, revenge, extortion, but nothing fit. The person who had turned a household medicine into a weapon had vanished, leaving no evidence, no fingerprints, no warning. James William Lewis, the man who sent the extortion letter demanding $1 million, remained a focal point. His audacity was staggering, claiming responsibility for the poisonings and attempting to profit from fear, but he was never linked to the actual murders. Convicted of extortion, he went to prison, but the true killer's identity remained a chilling mystery. Chicago and the nation were left with a haunting truth. The person responsible had walked away, unseen and unpunished. The impact of the Tylenol murders extended far beyond Chicago. Johnson & Johnson, under CEO James Burke, had set a new standard in corporate responsibility. Their swift recall of over 31 million bottles and the introduction of tamper-proof packaging became a model for the entire industry. Foil seals, plastic wraps, and blister packs transformed how Americans purchased medicine, creating safeguards that persist to this day. Yet the public never forgot. Parents remained cautious, pharmacists remained vigilant, and a nation learned that even the most mundane objects could be weaponized. The Tylenol murders had changed daily life forever. Trust, once implicit, now required vigilance. Safety, once assumed, now demanded attention. Even decades later, the case remains unsolved. The 7 victims' families were left with grief, unanswered questions, and a void that could never be filled. The killer's identity remains unknown, a ghost in the annals of American crime history. The Tylenol murders are more than a cold case. They are a lesson in fear, resilience, and the fragility of life. The murders also reshaped the way corporations, law enforcement, and the public approach safety. New regulations, packaging standards, and public awareness campaigns all trace back to those harrowing weeks in 1982. Every capsule taken today, every seal broken with care, is a testament to the lessons learned from a tragedy that changed an entire nation. The Tylenol murders are a story of ordinary people, extraordinary evil, and the invisible threads that connect them. They remind us that danger can lurk in the most familiar places, that trust can be manipulated, and that vigilance is more than prudence, it is survival. The killer may never be caught, but the lessons endure. The fear, the grief, and the courage of a city, and a nation, remain etched in history, a silent echo of what happened when something as ordinary as a pill became deadly. Even today, the story continues to haunt. The Tylenol murders are not just a historical event. They are a warning, a memory, and a chilling reminder that evil can strike where it is least expected. Ordinary life may seem safe, but the shadow of those capsules still lingers, a testament to lives lost, trust betrayed, and questions that may never be answered. If this chilling story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to uncover more unsolved true crime mysteries. Share your theories in the comments. Who do you think was behind the Tylenol murders?